Hi and welcome to this screencast on functions. Today I'm going to tell you how you create a function and how you work with input and produce outputs. I'm going to talk about variable scope and give you some rules of thumb when to encapsulate your code into a function. Creating a function in R is quite easy. First you type in the name of the function. Now I want to make a function called sum and square. Then I type in the assignment operator, which is this little arrow, and I type the keyword function. Finally, in parentheses, I put in the names of my input arguments. In this case, I will have two arguments called A and B. Now I need to put in the body of my function in curly braces, so I type in the braces like this. Finally, I can put in the code of my function inside the braces. In this case, I will type result and assign that's the value of a plus b squared. Now I've put my result, the result of this operation, into a variable called result, and now I need to return this from my function, so I simply type return result, and that's it. Now I can save my function here. I will save it in a file by pressing Ctrl S, and I'll save it here in a file called sum and square.r. Right. Now I can, as usual, press source to have my function run, and now my function will be put into the console, and I can use it down here. To use it, I can simply type sum and square, and now I can put in two values for a and b. I could put in, for example, 8 and 2, and when I press enter, my function will then add that. That's 10. Take the square, that's 100, and I get the result out here. There are a couple of common mistakes that people sometimes make when creating a function. So one common mistake is to set or reset the values of the input arguments inside the function. For example, if I set the variable a to 100 inside my function, then it will not work correctly when I call it. So when I call it with 8 and 2 as before, I get a different result, because even though a gets set to 8, it gets reset to 100 here before the computation is done. So that's one mistake that people sometimes make. Another mistake is to not return the right result, so I could maybe forget to write return result in here. And when I run the function without this return statement, there's no output. So the function doesn't return anything, and that's why it doesn't work. So you must remember to return the result up here, like before. Now I'll create a script that uses my sum and square function. So I press new file, rscript, and then I create a little script. First I make two variables, one called first, and I assign the value 8, another one called second, and I assign the value 2, and a third one called third, and I assign the value, which is the output of my function, sum and square, where the input arguments are first and second. Now I can run my file by pressing source, and I can see what happens. It creates my variables first and second with the two values I've chosen, and third gets assigned the value 100, which is the output of the sum and square function. So the inputs to sum and square is first and second, these two variables, but inside the sum and square function, these two variables are called a and b. And the function doesn't know about the variable names first and second. It just knows that it gets two values, which it calls a and b, and it returns a result. And out here, that result is put into third. So the names of the variables inside the function and outside in the script are independent. The function doesn't know anything about the variables that are outside, and the script here doesn't know anything about the variables that are inside sum and square. And that's a good thing, because that encapsulates my code, and it makes it easier to test the function independently. So we say that the variables out here and the variables inside the function are in a different scope, and that's a good thing, because it makes it possible to keep things separate and makes it easier to sort of overview the code. I chose to put my function and my script in different files, and that's not always a good idea. And let me show you why. Now I've restarted R, and if I now source my script, I get an error message. It says it cannot find the function sum and square, and that's because now after restarting R, I haven't sourced the R file yet. So one way to avoid this would simply be to have everything in one file. So I could simply put in my script down here below the function, and that would work nicely. However, if you want to have it in different files, that's also possible. Then you can simply type in the source command as part of the script. So I can type in source sum and square.r, and now as part of my script it will automatically source the function. Right. However, there's one thing you have to be aware of, and that's the working directory. If I press source now, it tries to source this sum and square.r from the current working directory, and it cannot find the file because I'm not in the correct directory. So to get this to work, you would have to go to Files, select More, and find the working directory where you've saved your file. That was in Screencasts, and select More and choose Set as Working Directory. Now you can see my console is in the Screencasts directory, and if I now source the file, it can actually find the sum and square, R, include that, and run the script. And now we can see it runs correctly. There are a few rules of thumb that you should consider when writing functions. First of all, your functions should have a clear and simple purpose. It should be well defined what the inputs are and what the output is. The function name should be very describing and telling of what the function does. The function shouldn't be too long. Usually you shouldn't have more than what you can have on screen without scrolling inside a function. Usually that would be less than 20 lines, but almost always less than 100 lines. Of course, there can be arguments sometimes to have longer functions than that, but these are the rules of thumb. Whenever you find yourself reusing parts of your code, you should consider making a function. That'll make it easier for you to reuse your code, and if you decide to change your code at some point, you only have to make changes one place inside that function.